You're live now.
I'm Phyllis Wetherby, and I've grown up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm now 86 years old. I joined NOW in 1968. I joined the Greater Pittsburgh Area chapter of NOW, which was founded by Wilma Scott Heide, either 66 when NOW was founded or 67 soon after. I believe it was the third chapter of NOW. I have been active in that chapter ever since. In 1973 or 4, by that time we had 9 chapters in the Pittsburgh area, and the other chapters are getting a little bit huffy about there being a Greater Pittsburgh Area chapter, and so we changed the name to the First Pittsburgh Chapter, since the banks of, the First National Bank, the Fifth Presbyterian Church, things like that. So we're the First Pittsburgh chapter of NOW. I'm president of that chapter right now, and I've been active, of course, since 1968. I came to NOW from politics and have stayed in politics as well. The First Pittsburgh chapter, and I think because of Wilma Scott Heide and some of the other folks, has been very, very active. I guess the first thing I should say is that in 1972, Ellie Smeal joined the chapter and in 73 she became the chapter development vice president of the Greater Pittsburgh Area chapter. Molly Yard became the secretary of, I think it was still the Greater Pittsburgh Area chapter. And of course, Wilma Scott Heide, who founded that chapter, all became national presidents of NOW. So I think that one of the problems with chapter leadership in the First Pittsburgh chapter is that as soon as they get to be leaders, they get gone. Among the things we have done, I think one of the really significant ones was the Pittsburgh Press case. And in that case, and that was begun by Wilma, we sued the Pittsburgh Press because of their sex-segregated want ads. They had help wanted male and help wanted female. And Wilma and some other members of the chapter filed that suit, I think, before I was a member of the chapter. We went on, and I was very active in that, and we picketed, and we met, and we did this and we did that. The Pittsburgh Human Relations Council found that sex-segregated want ads violated a human rights amendment to the Pittsburgh ordinances. In fact, I believe it was an ordinance that NOW had championed and gotten added. When the Pittsburgh Press told their delegation that it wasn't against the law to have sex-segregated want ads, and so we got a law, and after we got the law, we sued them. Sued them first in the Pittsburgh Human Relations Commission, and I participated very heavily in that particular meeting, or in that particular event. It went on and it was appealed to the courts in Pennsylvania and then eventually to the U.S. Supreme Court, who in, I believe, 1973 found for us, and that ended the legal segregation of want ads in the newspaper. I heard about the Equal Rights Amendment after I joined NOW. Let's see, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or breached by the United States or by any state on account of sex. We got that into the Pennsylvania Constitution by 1970, I believe, was when we had the final referendum. And in 1971, we were active in the national campaign. What have I done? I certainly was one of the chief people, and Ellie, of course, was too, of gaining ratification in Pennsylvania. We had meetings in Harrisburg. We traveled to Harrisburg. We had I remember we had this one lobby day when we were going after, I believe, the Senate. And we had kits for every senator. And then we had a list of now members in Pennsylvania who were represented by those senators. And whenever anybody came in, the now member came in to lobby, the first thing they did was stop at the a person on the lobby, on the main floor of the Capitol, and they had a big box of folders that we had put together, and we had answers to the various objections to the Equal Rights Amendment from women who were concerned about it. So that I know particularly there was a group of young girls, girls that were about the age to go into the military, talking about whether they were concerned about being drafted and what difference it made discrimination against them in the military mattered. So we had something that applied to each one of the objections was in this kit. And as the Senate, and then people had to meet with a senator. We had these packets and kept track of each person. So we made sure that every senator had a visit from NOW people. And we tried to talk to the senator in that case before the day was out. I found out that some of the people who pretended to be activists in my own chapter, when I talked about this later, she laughed and said, "Oh, we left it with the staff." And so they had violated the rule, but we really wanted that to get, and they weren't allowed to visit their own senator until we had gotten completed with all of the Senate packets. If you want to know, that's one of the things that we did. We, of course, wrote letters. We put stuff in newspapers. We had meetings. You know, whatever we did on that. In 1970, so anyways, in 1973, U.S. Steel, where I had integrated the Stag Party, you understand, I didn't conceal my activism, but I never asked permission. And I tried not to offend them entirely, but the Stag Party was too much. It was, that's kind of a long story, which you don't need to know, but I did integrate the Stag Party, so that after that, there was a notice came down from headquarters. We were in research that there was a thing called the Good Fellows Club, which was, as the librarian said, the tarnished brass, the men in middle management, and they, those men in middle management met, I think, monthly. Yes, ma'am.
Oh no, I just my finger's getting
fine. So they met monthly, and after I integrated the Stag Party, a notice came around saying that men weren't supposed to charge trips to town to go to the meetings of this club, because that was not really part of their employment. And a few years later, the anti-feminist woman in our office was now a member of the Good Fellows Club. So at one point I had refused to mark Miss or Mrs. on a form I was filling out. I just left it blank and put my name in there. And a day later she said she was the secretary, she had been the secretary of the president of the company of the subsidiary of U.S. Steel, and now she was somebody, a high-ranking woman who ran things, but she was not, she had been secretary of an earlier president. The new president came with his secretary, and they had to find a place for her. Anyway, she said, well, you hadn't marked that, so I picked one for you. I think she picked Miss for me, whichever it was. She identified my, at that point, my marital status. But U.S. Steel picked me up in 1973, in January 1973, and on 4 days' notice sent me to Brazil for an assignment that was supposed to take 3 to 6 weeks. But it took 3 months. And I came back for a month, and the guy that I had worked for in Brazil asked me to come back for 3 years, to make the full 3 years. And I told him I wouldn't until I'd come back here. I came back to the United States, that would have been June in '73, and I think there was a meeting, there was it was a national meeting of commissions on the status of women, and at that point I was a member of the Women's Commission in Pennsylvania. So I ran the mimeograph machine for them. And then there was a now meeting where we voted to pick at the Vatican Embassy. There was I'm sure there was an ERA thing, but besides that, Kathy Wilson, who's here today, had been elected vice president of the chapter, and I took her to Harrisburg and introduced her to everybody. I turned over all the things, here was the press case was in limbo, here was the Equal Rights Amendment. I showed her all the things that I was working on so that she could take over as president. Went back to Brazil, and I came back in January each year to renew my working visa, and then they were for only 6 months, so I came back in between. But I believe that I was sent there because at that point the Justice Department was investigating 7 steel corporations about discrimination on the basis against women and minority males. And they were about to get to me to interview me, but they didn't because I was in Brazil. In addition to that, I had talked to someone from the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and told them how to identify women. You count the phone book because in the U.S. Steel phone book, women's full names were listed and men's initials. So you could call a woman by her first name, which they did. You called Mr. Jones or Mr. Smith, but you called me Phyllis.
Very good.
So anyway, that's a few of the things I did.
Thank you. They're wonderful stories, but I could spend hours listening to you.
I'm sure.
Okay,
And
thank you.